In your advocacy here and in the President's counsel writing back to Mr. Hur, you're saying that there were gratuitous comments, that there are false pieces of information. How is the American public supposed to process this when we also live in a world where former President Trump asserts that there was a politicized process that resulted in his prosecution related to classified documents and other things? So for the public, if Democrats and this administration say, trust the Department of Justice, trust the institutions, but you're also arguing here gratuitous political cheap shots and false assertions. How are they to process that?
Well, I talked about this actually a minute ago, and I think, when you have the former Attorney General, when you have the former acting FBI director, when you have the former general counsel of the FBI, these are experienced people at the Justice Department who spent decades working at the Justice Department. And they're saying it's gratuitous. They're saying that this is inappropriate, that this is inconsistent with DOJ policy and practice. That's them saying it. We agree. You heard the president speak forcefully about this last night. You heard the vice president speak forcefully about this today. We certainly agree that it's gratuitous. But I explained this a little bit in the opening. We're in a very pressurized political environment. And when you are the first special counsel in history not to indict anybody, there is pressure to criticize and to make statements that maybe otherwise you wouldn't make. And I think that it leaves you wondering why some of these critiques are in there. But I think it's also important to just fundamentally distinguish between the prior case that you mentioned. I want to be careful in terms of commenting on that. But the special counsel report goes into great detail about the differences and distinctions there. And I think it's important to understand that the criticisms that you're hearing of the gratuitous comments in the report, which are wrong, frankly, this is being shared by people who have deep experience at the Justice Department.
On the many issues related to memory that certainly seem to prompt an angry response from the president and from his advocates, is there anything being done to address that issue in an ongoing way? Obviously, counsel wrote asking for some of those things to be removed. It is potential that Robert Hur could be called before Congress to testify in public. Are there any steps that the administration would take addressing that specific issue? Is it in relation to overall medical physician's report of the president or other things to demonstrate what is the issue with memory, and is it a factor that deals with his capacity to serve?
Well, I have a lot of issues with the contents of that question, and Kareen's answered a lot about the president's transparency in his medical records and his physical and things of that nature. And I'll leave that to Kareen to handle. But I'll say, I just read you this. Page 248, later in the report, he says, quote, "We expect the evidence of Mr. Biden's state of mind to be compelling," pointing to him providing, quote, "clear and, quote, forceful testimony." I can't explain why the report veers all over the place on this issue. I can just say, and as you've heard from the vice president, you heard from members of Congress yesterday talking about their recent interactions with the president. One, Congressman Goldman from New York, talking about his interaction with the president the day before this interview, when Congressman Goldman was on the ground in Israel, and the long and intensive and detailed conversation they had about what was going on the ground. We just reject that this is true. And I think that it does raise questions about the gratuitousness, and it raises, makes you wonder why that's in there.